Hey up, welcome back. So out on the road now for the first time since I fitted the to the Crosstourer here the Scorpion Circuit slip-on exhaust and also the AS3 Performance bash plate. I'm not expected to notice any difference when I'm riding with the bash plate, but what I can certainly report with some degree of confidence is that not only does the Scorpion exhaust look good, it sounds good, and the extra sort of handful of brake horsepower that Scorpion claim that fitting this exhaust gives the bike, I didn't expect to notice, but in the short distance from where I live in Bingley to the Morrison's filling station at Yeadon Guiseley there, I certainly have noticed it, which is quite a surprise. There's definitely a little bit more thrust there going on. Now, for anybody that's sort of seen the video where I show you how I cack-handedly fit this exhaust, made a fundamental mistake in the process of so doing by leaving the old gasket on. But I soon sussed out my cock up and put it right, and touch wood, we're cooking on gas now. On the back of that video, I know one or two people have sort of said, well, I don't know why you bother changing the OEM exhaust, the stock exhaust. And I can see a lot of logic in that argument. There would have been a time, you know, when I'd agreed, but I found as time's gone on that my brain's less the decision maker when it comes to motorcycling for me, and the heart definitely subordinates it in that respect. And I couldn't give you any logical context to that, but I think there comes a point when you think, you know, if it brings you a bit of pleasure, why not? And certainly hearing and feeling this thing rumbling away with that extra sort of rich bass quality that this exhaust has brought to the engine sound, it just adds to the overall enjoyment. And more than that I can't say. Other than that, I can definitely tell there's a slight improvement in the oomph. So this is my first ride out this year, bearing in mind now it's what, the 8th of July I think, so we're well into summer. It's my first ride out to Squire's Cafe in Sherburn, just outside of Leeds. Now, for those of you that don't know Squire's Cafe, it's got quite a rich history really. I mean, when I first started going there, which would be back 20 years ago, it was sort of referred to as Squire's Milk Bar. It was much smaller than it is now, and further down the road, almost in the centre of Sherburn itself. But it used to get absolutely rammed out. In fact, it was ridiculous, and I can understand why a lot of the locals had got pissed off. But the guy that bought it moved the premises to a disused pub just on the B1 treble 2, and since then I think that move took place in the early 2000s, and since then it's prospered exponentially. And every biker in the north of England knows about Squires. you know, as much as they know about Seaways at Friday Thought and one or two other high profile, large capacity biker cafes. But Squires, if you don't know them, get onto the website, www.squires-cafe.co.uk, I think. And in ordinary times they have lots of diaried events, and they've got stacks of land, there's plenty of room for camping, they regularly have live bands on, they are licensed premises, and it's a bit of a class act. I find the food's alright. Some people have said in the past the food ain't anything to write home about, but I tell you what, for what I think it's, for less than £6, their full-size breakfast is proper desperate Dan stuff. Now, I always found it bang on. Of course, if you go into a biker's cafe and you're expecting haute cuisine and chuffing Raymond Blanc or somebody behind to kitchen counter there frying eggs, then I think your expectations are set a little bit too high. But it's almost my second home, and this is since lockdown in March, when of course Squires, along with virtually every other similar venue, shut its doors, and following the easing of lockdown, further still, on Saturday just gone, they've been open. So I don't know what sort of arrangements they've got in place, but I'm just going to rock up now and see what the sketch is. And I really have missed going there. There's no two ways about it. If you're ever feeling a bit down or a bit out of sorts or whatever the weather, if you jump on your bike, have a ride over to Squires, chew the fat a bit with the guys and girls there, all at a safe distance of course, outside. I shan't be going inside. Then, you know, you feel, or I do anyway, you feel an awful lot better very quickly. So this run today's the usual route that I take, which is via Boston Spa and Tadcaster, and we'll see what's what. Maybe it won't be open at all, maybe they're just open for the weekend, but certainly through the summer they're open 7 days a week. So you see, I had a Porsche there flashing me because he thinks that the spotlights are too bright. But I ask you, a Porsche driver whinging about somebody else's lights being too bright? Yeah, rock on, Tommy. I'd be just a sort of candidate if I didn't have these lights on to come out of the side of a road and wipe me out. So if you've seen my the video that I did, the first one entitled Best Adventure Bike Ever in relation to this bike on the Crosstourer, you'll be aware that I sort of set a context by which I sort of arrived at that judgment, which was no one specific thing, but was a whole host of things, including what adventure bikes are mainly used for, and of course the cost. And I got a lot of very supportive comments. I think there were one or two BMW GS fanboys that wanted to take issue with me, which is fair enough. If you're a BMW GS fanboy and you've got 20 grand to spend on a brand new BMW GS, crack on, because you can have 2 of these for that price, brand spanking new. But the point I was trying to make really is, before you arrive at a judgment as to whether a bike's good, bad or indifferent, you've got to set the parameters of the debate. And I think a lot of people, when they think adventure bike, the sort of off-roady bit of it tends to punch a little bit above its weight, really, because the vast majority of these bikes are used for touring, of course. And I've got a BMW GS Adventure. I do like it. It's the bike I take out in all weathers. It's the bike that I run through winter, because it's that little bit older. It's not brand new like this one, so I don't tend to worry about it as much. And it's got all those gizmos and electronics, the electronic suspension and the different the suspension settings and preload settings that can be controlled electronically from the handlebar switchgear. But in terms of enjoyment and riding the bike, it gives me nothing that this bike doesn't give me, and this bike gives me an awful lot more power and a lot more thrill from the engine, and a lot more satisfaction from the overall build quality, because it knocks the GS into a cocked hat on all of those fronts. But it sparked a little bit of debate, which is great. I suddenly went, in the space of sort of 3 weeks, from something like 140 odd subscribers to 202, so brilliant. Thanks to everybody that subscribed, it's fantastic. I mean, all I aim to do is, I've been motorcycling on and off for most of my adult life. For a very brief period I was a police motorcyclist, before I moved on to other things in the police force. Now I'm retired, of course, but all I aim to do is, it's just purely practitioner based. So the video about the fitting of the Scorpion exhaust, I didn't sit down and meticulously plan it. I didn't rehearse it. I didn't have a schedule of which parts I would cover and which parts, if I got them wrong, I'd re-edit, and the rest of it. It was, because if you're going to do something like that yourself, you don't have that luxury, do you? You just crack on, and if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, and you find a workaround, and you learn from the experience. And what I was trying to do really is just crack on with it, and that's why I made an absolute schoolboy error, a right cock up with the old exhaust gasket, which I didn't take off before I tried to fit the new system. But I think it's best to leave stuff like that in, so people can actually see your angst and frustration and see the sweat of your brow, and then think, well, I can avoid that if I do something similar. And that's the whole idea, really, not to produce the heavily edited, clinical, sanitised end product that makes some sort of inherent presumption that I'm a brilliant mechanic or have stacks of experience when it comes to putting accessories on bikes. I don't. I have a fair bit of experience, but I have a fair bit of experience of making all sorts of pig-eared judgments and messes that I've had to work around and put right. And I'd rather on each and every occasion that it had been more straightforward, but it isn't. But on those occasions where, I have done one or two things that have been a little bit outside of my comfort zone, I've found a huge amount of value and guidance from people on YouTube who've done it for the first time, and have been good enough to actually make a video of it and give you a bit of an insight into how they've gone on. So that's why I do it, really. I mean, it's take it or leave it, really, isn't it? But I just hope it helps somewhere along the way. So here comes the rain that the BBC weather app said was highly unlikely. There's there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's the BBC weather app, which is consistently, absolutely, abortively wrong. But anyway, I've come to a conclusion, certainly in the summer, that if your policy is that unless it's absolutely bone dry and guaranteed no rain, you're not going to ride your bike, then pretty much you're going to ride your bike about 3 days a year. It's ridiculous. And when you've got a bike with the sort of build quality and finish of something like this Honda Crosstourer, you're not going to have any worries whatsoever concerning any adverse effects on the finish as a result of the weather. I always give this a spray of Silcoline Pro Prep. She brings it up nice and shiny, puts a layer of protection on the bike, and makes it that bit easier to clean afterwards. And I think that's the way to go. I'm sick and tired really of sort of looking days in advance at the weather forecast and thinking, well, there's 10 days now where I can't go out for a ride. I think as long as you've got the right kit on and you're not trying to ride in dangerous conditions such as 100 mile an hour crosswinds or going out in winter in snow and ice, providing you're not doing that, you've got to crack on with it really, because that's just how it is here in the United Kingdom. I just think the great shame at the moment is one of the absolute joys of motorcycling is to be able to jump on your bike and go to the coast or into the countryside for 2 or 3 days and stop over at a B&B. Nobody's been able to do that, of course. And these few early tentative steps that are being taken with some limited reopening of the hospitality sector, I think personally I just want to wait and see how that's mapping out in terms of safety before I'd want to jump back in. But that's certainly something I think we've all desperately missed. Anyway, so back to that original video when I was sort of talking about the best adventure bike and why you don't need all that tech. Just flicking through MCN the other day, and if I didn't know better, I'd say that they're being funded by companies that provide PCP or whatever it's called, the effective leasing of your bike. Go buy this bike, £200 a month, fantastic. And the first figure that seems to be quoted is that monthly payment figure. Because if you go down that route, you don't pay that final balloon payment, the bike's never yours. And alright, you can change your bike every 2 years, but I would suggest you're never going to bond with that bike. But there seems to be a heavy emphasis on that, on the personal credit plan, and there seems to be a heavy emphasis on the tech. And personally, I think it's gone too far. It's become a complete distraction from what riding's all about. And it seems now that if a bike ain't got an IMU, an inertial measurement unit, a 6-axis IMU, a 9-axis IMU, chuffing heck, there's only 3 axes. Where do they get 6 and 9 from? But anyway, I'm some techno-bobbing somewhere will correct me. But I always thought we lived in a 3-dimensional world, so 3 axes of movement, pitch, roll and yaw. But anyway, I would argue every bike's got an IMU, because an IMU is something that knows the relative position of the bike and can adjust the bike's performance and the way it rides according to that information. Well, if that ain't what you're doing as a rider yourself, I'm not so sure you should be on the road. Because, you know, a rider that's not aware of the position of the bike that is on or she's on, and as a result of that is not able themselves to modulate input to the machine to adapt its track accordingly, then I'd seriously question whether, you know, whether such a thing should actually be on the road. And this industry-driven obsession, and that's all it is, it's to give some Emperor's New Clothes style misplaced value of worth or relative worth between one bike and another to attract would-be purchasers. And I think it's a complete distraction over and above certain fundamental aspects of technology which I would absolutely accept have been a great boon, such as ABS, to a certain extent traction control, cruise control certainly on a long journey is a good thing, whether it's electronic or mechanical, OEM or aftermarket, it don't matter. But you know, over and above that, I struggle with the relevance of having a bike, and I've absolutely had a couple of bikes that have had IMUs and have had the ability to modulate the ABS on a bend with the bike leaned over. But in terms of the overall riding experience and enjoyment, it hasn't made a shred of difference. And the danger is that if you go out for a ride and uppermost in your thoughts is the bike's capacity in that way, then I think there's a tendency to become a little bit complacent and take one or two unnecessary risks in the mistaken belief that the bike's electronics will rescue you from every example of the laws of physics. So I just think it's become an end in itself, and it's become way too much of a distraction. Because I absolutely don't think that anybody else on a high-tech GS or Super Adventure or Multistrada or whatever is having a better riding experience than I am right now, here and now on this road. And if all it's about is bragging rights when you get to the biker's calf, well, what a sorry state of affairs. So I think that combination of factors of ridiculously expensive bikes, £20,000 plus, £30,000 for a Goldwing, 20 or 30 years ago there were no such thing as PCP, and bikes like that would have been entirely unaffordable except for a tiny minority of very wealthy people. But But now, of course, with the great PCP scam, I do think it's a bit of a scam. People can't see past the headline figure, which is the monthly payment, and they'll look and they'll see something like a brand new a brand new BMW GS, and they'll look and all they'll see is £200 a month, 3 or 4 years or whatever. And there might be a cursory glance at that last balloon payment, which just about nobody ever makes, you know. So people are just turning the bikes over every 2 or 3 years, new bike, new bike, new bike. But they never own the bike. And to my mind, if you never own the bike, you're not bonding with it. You know, you're not building a relationship up with that bike. I mean, the best relationship I ever had with a bike, and it was such that when I eventually had to let her go, it was like a bereavement. I had an old Honda Pan-European ST1100, and that was my transport, day in, day out, including being on call. And back then when I had that bike, I'd just been appointed as a member of the command team at the police station at Huddersfield Division, as a chief inspector on there, and I was on call on a regular basis, and then getting called out to command firearms incidents at 3 o'clock in the morning, the rest of it, and Bingley to Huddersfield's like 20 miles of hell. And that bike, that old Pan-European ST1100, it was K registered. It was Kilo 202 Romeo Foxtrot Echo, K202 RFV, remember it well. I bought it off a Bobby at Halifax in 2001 with 27,000 mile on the clock. When I passed her on, she had 60,000 mile on the clock. But that bike, I bought it cash. It was 100% mine from day one. I wasn't having to worry about in 2 years' time, right pal, here's a few grand of a balloon payment, otherwise we want the bike back. There were none of that sketch. And she wanted for nothing that bike. My brilliant indie mechanic Steve Dale at Steaton, just outside of Keighley, he looked after it, and you know, the bike got everything that it ever needed, but it never ever let me down. And I think that's the truly rewarding element about owning a motorcycle, not the transient, shallow notions of riding something that has cutting edge technology that perhaps only 1 in 50 of the next bikes that you see might have. That's meaningless. That's hubris, isn't it? That's all that is. And I think, and it's not just motorcycles, is it? It's, you know, it's cars as well, it's domestic appliances, it's white goods, brown goods, you name it. If it hasn't got the latest technology, it is, in the eyes of the commercial world, demeaned in some way. Back in 70s and 80s, when I was growing up, my dad was an electrical engineer working for Hoover, and he used to mend vacuum cleaners and washing machines and irons and you name it. And back then you no more a thought of skipping a broken vac after 1 or 2 years than you would have done a demolishing your house and buying a new one every 2 years. But now that's what we do, you know. They either end up in landfill, or if you're lucky they end up being recycled on some level. But back then they were built to a standard, and if they went wrong they got repaired. And about the only electronics going on were the switch and the brush motor. It was a simple life. I mean, the vac that my mum used to push round in 1974, I'm bloody certain that were the same vac she were pushing round when I joined cops in 1983 and beyond then. Not anymore, folks. So fine if it makes you happy and you've got stacks of money, or you don't mind paying a fortune, an absolute fortune, to some of these greedy corporate organisations that are going to end up effectively charging you £30,000 for a £20,000 motorcycle, just for the pleasure for a couple of years of being able to say that you're riding something that's got the very latest technology and that nobody's riding anything else that's got anything more capable. Really. Because they are absolutely necking a fortune out of people of these companies. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely fully understand the argument which says it's a means of affording something fantastic that you wouldn't otherwise be able to dream of having. But I think that argument has limited value. And as I say, I think the enjoyment is of a very, very transient nature. It's not enduring, it's not real, it's not dimensional, it's shallow. And it's same with cars, innit, for young uns. I mean, when I passed my test in 1981 as a 19-year-old, the only car that I could even realistically contemplate buying was a 1973, so 1981, 1973, or an 8-year-old basic 1300cc Mark III Ford Cortina, which the fellow was selling for about 500 quid, but it were mint. Imperial maroon were the colour, absolutely mint. I went to see this car and I fell in love with it, but I didn't have 500 quid. I mean, I think my weekly wages back then were 30 odd. So I wanted a car loan. Now, if you want a car on tick, if you want a car on payments, whether it's HP, PCP, bank loan or whatever, it's just ridiculously simple. A phone call or an application online and you've got your money, sign a few forms, there you go. But when I had to buy this first car, I had to go and have a personal meeting with the bank manager at my local branch of Lloyd's Bank. Now back then, bank managers weren't just, you know, glorified clerks. The bank manager were gone. We're talking Captain Mannering here. The bank manager was a guy, because they were all guys, with absolute status that you respected. The same status as a doctor or a solicitor. You know, they were right up there. And I was shitting myself when I went to see him. And I think he interviewed me for about 45 minutes. And he wanted to know about, you know, because my mum and dad had an account there, obviously, and what had I learnt from them about life, and what sort of money were I earning, and didn't I think it were a bit too soon for this amount of capital outlay, and it were a proper vetting procedure. And all I wanted to borrow were 500 quid, and at the end of the day, he says, well, you can have 300, and if that's not good enough for you, piss off. And that were it. So I ended up getting 300 quid and having to blag the other 200 by way of another loan, interest-free, care at bank of mum and dad. But talk about love that car, and talk about look after it and appreciate it and value it in every single way, in a way that I would suggest that people just sign on a dotted line now and get a new car. Don't. And it ain't lamp swinging, it's just a fact of history from times when life had more depth and meaning and resonance to it than today's false, materialistic, shallow, airheaded approach to things, where everybody knows the cost of everything and the value of absolutely nothing, and it extends through all stratas of society. You see it playing out every day. And you see that attitude, that sense of entitlement without the graft. Yeah, the sense of entitlement without the need to graft and to earn it. You see that playing out now, like when lockdown were lifted. So first 3 months of lockdown, because I'm in a vulnerable group, never went out of the house, not to shop for food. I was furloughed from work, not for exercise, not for knack-all. I was that bloody terrified. But it wasn't an issue, and when lockdown started to be eased, I didn't suddenly have this burning desire to go out and behave like a dick, like we've seen a lot of people doing, up and down, whether they're rocking up at beaches on the coast 10 at a time, or whether they're crowding inside pubs without masks and bloody 2 inches apart, never mind 2 metres, and carrying on and shouting and bawling and all the rest of it. You know, that's a reflection of a shallow frustration that has its roots in a sense of absolute entitlement to everything that got taken away for 3 months. Because people weren't given a choice, were they? Because however much you wanted to go to the pub during those 3 months, you couldn't, because they were all shut. And likewise everything else. And then when suddenly there's an opportunity, rather than take a measured approach to it, you get people straight into party mode. And the fact that somewhere down the line unquestionably will cost some people their lives doesn't seem to occur to people. You know, what sort of humanity is that, where somebody says, well, bollocks to people's entitlement to live and not to die a horrible death. I want to go out and have a song and a dance with my mates and a few beers and get pissed and carry on something shocking. And I don't care what all these knobhead scientists say, because they don't know what they're talking about. You know, a lot of people have this attitude. You can see it playing out. And it's absolutely frightening. So, if Squires is open, I will park up in the car park, the bike park, and if I do have a conversation with anybody, it will be from 2 metres away, even if that means I have to go running around the car park to keep my distance. But it's like, in it, you've got all these really learned inspectors, learned experts There might be inspectors as well, I don't know. Learned experts, but really, you know, people who have been in the field of epidemiology and medicine, science for years. And yet there's folk drinking in pubs that think they know better. And yet those same people, if they had something wrong with them, they wouldn't hesitate to go down to the doctor, and they wouldn't be telling the doctor that the doctor didn't know what he was talking about, would they? You know, they'd expect the tablets to treat whatever it is that they had. And those tablets only work because over many, many decades scientific research has been carried out and proved to work in certain circumstances, and that's how medical science evolves. Squires.